Good afternoon. I am not the Reverend Barbara Mraz. I'm Joan Potter, her dear friend. The sermon is written by Barbara. These are her words. She wants the family and all of you to know how disappointed she is that she couldn't be here. She's in the hospital with a heart issue. She will be out soon, but as much as she wanted to be here, she couldn't. And before I start, I'd like to remind all of you that you're invited to join the family for a reception in the Whipple Chapel following the Evensong, and it's just right down the hall here. In the name of Jesus, the face of God turned in our direction. Those of you who knew Bill Donovan may be surprised to see me up here tonight. I'm surprised to see me up here. So a brief explanation in which some of the good priest's character will be revealed. I'm Barbara Mraz, deacon in the diocese for 40 years, currently at St. John the Evangelist in St. Paul. 8 years ago, when Bill established the ongoing Fontaine Preaching Awards, one given each year, I was honored to be the first recipient. Part of the award is to do a sermon at St. Mark's. I worked my heart out on it. Other than Bill's command to provide a double-spaced copy by 7:30 in the chapel, I almost saluted in response. We had no communication. I thought the sermon went well, but I had no response of any kind from Father Donovan. Pretty sure he hated it, I thought. And then, years afterwards, I was contacted by Mara and Kevin, Bill's children, with the request to preach at his funeral, now this memorial Evensong. Evidently, the sermon had passed muster, but as with so many men of his generation, superfluous communication was just not done. I am so honored to be here in this pulpit at this time. A giant of a man, parent, priest, professor, husband, archaeologist, historian, truly a full life, well lived. Canon for 47 years at this cathedral, his close friendship with the late Dean Douglas Fontaine provides a whole new dimension into his character. 2 examples. On his first Sunday at St. Mark's, Doug and Bill were administering communion, splitting the rail, following the custom of a former rector that it added to the solemnity if he made the sign of the cross with the host before putting it in the hand of each communicant. He had no sooner waved a wafer in the air over the first person kneeling there when a loud shout came from Doug. "Donovan, what are you doing, shaking off flies?" You might wonder what such a committed Christian, an intellectual, really, believed himself. I've often wondered this about so many pillars of the faith. What does it boil down to, after all? Amazingly, we have access to this in a sermon he gave several years ago called The Irreducible Minimum. It is a brilliant gift to us to see this fine mind and good heart logically sort through what is most important. He says, "It is my ties to other individuals that make my life worth living. They are the most important thing of all. Starting and still continuing with another generation are my ties to my family. But it is far more than family alone. The number of persons in whom I have come to find Jesus continues to amaze me. Some relationships have been long and some brief. Not all of our human interactions are this significant. We know the ones that are, those in which we call each other by name, those in which the clasp of hands is not perfunctory. But most of all, those relationships that we recognize are changing us, changing the person one thinks one is. Nothing in the biblical stories nor in our experience explains the mystery. What causes some and not others to call? And why at this moment and not that? Why are some calls easy to hear and not others? All I know is that calls unexpectedly do come and relationships do develop. Some are brief and others long. But reflection always reveals the changes in the person I am when I realize that I have found in another person one who becomes Jesus for me. In the chapel at my theological college in England is a painting of an image of Jesus holding a book, and on its open page is written, "You do not choose me, I choose you." But my experience tells me that it works both ways. He calls me, and I call him. And the challenge is to remain open to both being called and to calling in return. Is there life after death? That's on all of our minds at these occasions. Here's one way to think about it. In a mother's womb were two babies. "Do you believe in life after delivery?" one twin asks. The other replied, "Why, of course. There has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There is no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but there will be more light than here. Maybe we will walk with our legs and eat from our mouths. Maybe we'll have other senses that we can't understand now." The first replied, "That is absurd. Walking is impossible. And eating with our mouths? Ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies nutrition and everything we need. But the umbilical cord is so short. Life after delivery is to be logically excluded." The second insisted, "Well, I think there's something, and maybe it's different than it is here. Maybe we won't need this physical cord anymore." The first replied, "Nonsense. And if there is life, then why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery, there is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere." "Well, I don't know," said the second, "but certainly we will meet Mother, and she will take care of us." The first replied, "Mother? You actually believe in Mother? That's laughable. If Mother exists, then where is she now?" And the second said, "Well, she's all around us. We are surrounded by her. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist." Said the first, "Well, I don't see her, so it is only logical. She doesn't exist." To which the second replied, "Sometimes when you're in silence and you focus and you really listen, you can perceive her presence and you can hear her loving voice calling down from above." Relationships are the key to knowing God. And a most intimate form of relationship is family. Bill's devotion to his family is notable, and grief at his death extensive. Let me add this perspective. Here is one of my favorite statements about family from the 19th century book, How Green Was My Valley, by Richard Llewellyn, about a Welsh family of coal miners. I saw behind me those who had gone, and before me those who are to come. I looked back and saw my father and his father and all our fathers, and in front to see my son and his sons and the sons upon sons beyond. And all their eyes were my eyes. As I felt, so they had felt and were to feel, as then, so now, as tomorrow and forever. Then I was not afraid, for I was in a long line that had no beginning and no end. And the hand of his father grasped my father's hand, and his hand was in my hand, and my unborn son took my right hand. All, up and down the line that stretched from time that was to time that is and is not yet. And we raised our hands to show the link, and we found that we were one, born of woman, son of man, had in the image, fashioned in the womb by the will of God, the eternal Father. I was of them, they were of me and in me, and I in all of them. And the message that death is not the end, but a transition into a new beginning, is an idea that has resonance in the natural world and in our own life as we look back on it honestly. But how do you love when your heart has been broken and loss empties you out? It may be that it is love that lets us back in, a love more ancient, more enduring than the grief we bear now. Henry David Thoreau wrote that the only cure for sorrow is to love. Easy to say, to be sure, but maybe it's more to allow ourselves to be loved by those who don't know how to do it, but are trying. By the world outside our window in its beauty and power, and by letting the simplest blessings of the day wash over us without judgment, by moments of faith that come to us as a gift we didn't expect. Bill's was a loving voice, and his life well lived, embodying devotion to his family, faith, love, and beauty. At the end of Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare writes, and Barbara asked me to remind you that Bobby Kennedy used these words for his own brother, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, at his funeral. When she shall die, take her and cut her out in little stars, and she will make the face of heaven so bright that all the world will be in love with night. Rest in peace, Bill Donovan, and rise in light, beauty, and the glory of God that you came to know in Jesus Christ. Amen.